Now, I get the chance to introduce somebody, and he's taken advantage of the full program. He's been everything from an IRO to a passive to a lead. And tonight we're going to talk about one of his lead projects that he has taken full cycle. So he bought it, he ran it, and he sold it, and we're going to talk about all aspects of it. Peter, why don't you come on up?
I told you guys we share a lot. You get to see a full round cycle of a multifamily.
That's right.
Are we on?
Oh, well, you were until you broke it.
Already. Here, let's turn it off. So
We can do handheld. Go.
break this one too.
Yeah.
All right, so while I'm working on this, why don't you
Just hang on to this for a minute.
start to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
So my name is Peter Fain. Here's the slides. All right, so this is me, my better half, our goddaughter, Riley. I've been, I guess let's start with that. So I'm actually a doctor of audiology by trade. So I graduated from Texas Tech, undergrad in 94, then master's in 96. So by the time I retired in 2016, I had been practicing for 20 years. Marco, emergency medicine physician, so kind of a grinding job to have, especially through a pandemic. But we decided that there needs to be a better way to make money other than running a practice that I had private practice that we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But when I sold, I had probably about 35 employees. I was a little bit over having 35 employees. And again, Marco is kind of burnt out from all the ER stuff that goes on in the hospital on a day-to-day basis. So we were looking for better ways to generate income too, something that would provide something passively, not necessarily we have to kill it to eat it. And real estate was what we came up with. Didn't know about lifestyles when we started trying to investigate, but we actually learned about lifestyles with a news segment at one point in time, probably 2014, 2015, and kind of started doing some research there. But I decided that since I had a business that I could sell, have a little bit of money to invest in real estate, I would be the one that gets to retire first. And I'm very happy that that happened that way. So 2016, we did sell the practice. I had 13 clinics when I sold. At my highest, I had 18 locations because I own Beltone hearing aid practices in West Texas, Eastern New Mexico as well.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is a lot of ground to cover. My dad actually, he's a mechanical engineer, was in the oil business forever. And he decided that he liked the gig that I was in, so he actually retired from the oil business and came to work with me. So he ran the West Texas business for us, and then we ended up selling that because Houston was growing so big and needed his manpower here. So that's kind of it. We had to sell just because we were getting too big here, which isn't a bad problem to have. But again, more responsibility, more employees, more headaches. So that it wasn't paying off like I wanted to financially as well. It was a good living, but it wasn't a great living. And so, again, I got to retire and sell my business, which was great. So when we did that in 2016, we actually joined Lifestyles in 2015. And so I had gone to educational road trips. I'd come to some of these classes and decided that this is what I needed to be focusing on full time. So we had the funds for me to buy a small 36 unit, I think it was, a small independent rental owner IRO deal. So we did that in 2017. We sold that.
I know you're freaking out. Some people said small 36 unit.
Okay, that's true. That's in my mind at the time, I thought it was a little bit small, but come to find out that's a good size to get started with, and it's big for.
But people who haven't bought their first single-family rental, they're like, "Oh, small." But
You know, and that's true. It's all about perspective, and I guess we were actually looking for something a little bit bigger just because of the amount of funds we had. So we were trying to scale according to what we had in the bank.
So what he's talking about there is something that we'll get into, and that is that when you come in, we're going to kind of size you up, your resources, what you can do, what you have time to do, what you have the capability to do, and we're going to structure where you start. I've had people that have started with 9 units. I'm trying to think if I've had anybody that started less on an IRO deal. I think that might have been the smallest one, but 36 units is a pretty healthy deal.
Well, I
to
guess
start with.
the other thing that was nice about that period of time, we were able just to put 20% down on a property to get into a bigger property, whereas now you're having to put more down, and so kind of limits the size that you're able to purchase. So, but we bought that in 2017, ran that for 18 months, and another Lifestyles member bought that from me. And when we sold that, we actually made a 200% return on that. So 18 months.
Give
So
him a
that
hand,
was
that's all right.
I've actually done that property twice up here, and it's been a good story to tell.
It's kind of nice to talk about 200%.
Yeah, we like
Just-
that.
And just to talk about the full circle, that property wasn't done when he sold it. He sold it to another member. It was her first property. And she sold it to another member, and I'm pretty sure it was their first
their
property.
first property as well,
So
yeah.
it's been through at least 3 hands inside
We're in the third
Lifestyles
generation now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in that time, so I'm a lead now. I've been a lead on 3 properties. I just sold 2 this past year, so I've got 1 property that I'm managing up right now. I'm passive 18 deals right now. I think I've been in about 23, 24 passive deals. Some of those have sold, but right now we've got about 18 that we're in. So I think
3,000 units.
yeah, we're over 3,000 units in passive deals right now. So it's been a good journey for us. But I did sell the IRO because I felt like being a lead, a syndicator, would kind of help me get my financial goals met faster. And part of that is not only to get me retired, but get Marco out of the hospital as well. So,
All right, I think we got all, whoops. All right, I think you covered some of this,
yeah,
but let's
we've
run down
already
these
kind of
bullet
talked
points.
about burnout, and I mean, everybody's here because they want something better, and it's, we're no different. So
So let's talk about that work-life balance, because when we were getting this presentation together a couple of weeks ago, I had to pull him off a dive boat somewhere to do these slides for me so we could get ready.
I was in the Caymans on a dive trip, which, interestingly enough, that's where I met Sorrell, was on a dive boat. I don't know if he's still in here or not.
I heard that story before we came
Yeah,
in. That was funny.
we were on a dive trip to Cozumel, and we'd been on the boat 3 days together already before we started talking about what we did and who we were a part of, and we both found out we were part of Lifestyle. So of course it was just kind of a fun relationship after that. But yeah, I met Sorrell on a dive boat in Cozumel. Yeah, so.
All right, so let's look at the property.
All right, so this is North Star Apartments. So this property is in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is a small college town, Stephen F. Austin University. I actually found out about this. I had a broker, Diane O'Brien. She brought this to me, which I've got a real estate license myself, and I had actually seen this property before she brought it to me, and I thought, you know what, who wants to go to Nacogdoches? I don't want to go to Nacogdoches. So I just kind of blew it off. And then a week later, she called, she's like, what do you think about Nacogdoches? I'm like, sounds great, let's check it out. So we went the next week, and the rest is history. But this property was owned by mom and pop. They had owned it for a few years. They owned another small property in another small town over. And it was just a husband and wife team that ran it. We bought this thing in 2019. It was 79 units and mid-70s build, but we bought it for just over $40,000 a door. So with what we wanted to do in rehab as well, this was another deal that was just 20% down. So we didn't have to put a lot down for the bank. The bank only required a 20% down payment. So that and the rehab only had to raise $1.2 million for this
And
project.
so this one was not an IRO deal. This was a syndication deal, so he had passive investors.
So we had 20 partners in this deal. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen a $40,000 door price tag in a long time.
Well, this was 2019. It was only 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That is a crazy number, though,
Yeah.
by today's standards. Okay, so 1.2 million, you had 20 members, so that's an average of 60,000. But what was the lowest person in this deal?
This one probably, I think, was 25K.
It's a 25.
Now, subsequently, I have had others that I've got 110, 115. I like giving opportunities for first-time folks to come in if they don't have 25 or 50K. And so this one, it was, I think, a 25K. I'm lying. It was 15,000.
Well, there you
I know who it was. Okay, so, but yeah, we had a 12-year loan term. Interest rate was 4.72, which that wasn't like super great for the day, but all the lenders were saying, since it's kind of far away from a metro market, that interest rates needed to be a little bit higher. So, I mean, it still worked for me. So we took advantage of it, and I did have 3 years of interest only on the loan. So with that rehab budget, again, $600K, that brought the total to 1.2 million.
All right, more numbers?
Okay, so how do you want to talk about these?
Okay, so let me give you a little definition just to get us started on this. What T3 and T12 means is trailing 3 and trailing 12 months. So what he is telling you here is he had 3 months and he is annualizing it, and it was doing $778,000 in rental income, right?
Right.
And by the same token, on the expense side, 12 months of expenses was $335,000. I'm rounding up there. On that side, monthly cash flow was $18,000.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Now, NOI, and I don't want to steal all your thunder from this weekend, but NOI is
Step
net
on your
operating.
toes if you go too far.
NOI is net operating income, and he's going to go through all the explanation of how we do all these, but it's basically income minus expenses equals net operating income.
And the value of the property is a function of the net operating income. So if you increase the NOI, you increase the value of the property. So we're going to look and see his slides, and you'll see what he did.
This is what we really focus on. We can go in, we can make the place nicer, and it's easy to justify higher rents. While we do that, Sorrel, I also heard put out there that we replace AC units, we do things that cause problems, leaky roofs, runny toilets, all that kind of stuff to do away with the problems, and it also cuts expenses. So that combination of increased income, decreased expensive, increased NOI, and that drives the price. All right? So you got this thing to a 10% cash-on-cash return.
Right. Yeah, we actually had it higher than that, but before we even bought the property, I had told investors that, look, we've got interest only that we've got for 3 years. We're going to distribute based on a number, assuming that we actually are paying down principal as well. And so anything above the number that I told them, I think, I'm just going to make this up, but I think something that I promised them was like 6% year one, 7% year two, 8% year three. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something to that nature. And then what I said is anything above that, we're going to keep in the bank just for a rainy day or a pandemic, which I'm glad we had that money.
And what eventually happened to that money? Where did it go?
So what happens at the end, so I was distributing and things were great with the investors, but once we sell the property, all that extra cash goes back to the investors as well.
Yeah, so one of the most important things as a lead is you want to protect the asset. You're protecting the investment of the investors, right? So keeping a little extra cash around, very safe way to go.
So yeah, by the time we bought this thing for, what did I say, 3.2, and we sold it for a little over 5 million. And so we had a healthy proceed of $1.5 million that were returned to investors. And so in 3 years, over 100% of money went back to investors. So
I want to make sure everybody understands this because people get confused. 127% return. If I invested $1, you gave me back $1.27?
So I gave you back $2.27.
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically what we did is we returned the $1.2 million to all the partners, and then we gave another $1.5 million on top of that. So that's the return that we were able to provide.
And that's in 3 years. Pretty good, huh?
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Who does that in the stock market? Bitcoin.
And while they were doing that, they also had this cash flow that he was sending out quarterly or whatever your distribution time frame was. So think about that. We're pretty lucky right now that we can have money in the bank and be getting 4 or 5% or whatever we can get with no risk. But here we're doubling that, and he was doing it back at a time when you were getting no money for your money in the bank, right? It was like 1/4% that you were getting back then, and he was getting 10% just on the distributions on the cash flow.
Yeah. So, and I know cap rates are a little bit beyond what we're talking about tonight, but this sale actually has an interesting story because we started thinking about selling the year before it sold. And at that point in time, interest rates were still low. They were if I were to sell my property, somebody could have gotten a new loan below what my 4 point whatever was that I was paying. So what my preference would have been is somebody would have come in and assumed my loan if they wanted to buy my property. But interest rates were so low, nobody wanted to do that. So we actually had a prepayment penalty that I had to pay. And so when we first started the sales process with this property, the sales price was much higher because I had to account for this prepayment penalty that I had to pay. So that's what this story with the 6 cap is we priced this out on a 6 cap.
Not everybody knows what a cap is. So again, it's short for a capitalization rate, and we will talk about that for quite a while on Sunday, just to make sure everybody understands it.
But the moral of the story is by the time this sold, I did have somebody, a Lifestyles member, that bought this, and they did assume my loan because the interest rates had gone so high that they ended up buying it at an 8.7 cap, which is unheard of today.
It is an unbelievable
I'm
story.
very excited that they were able to do that, and we were able to pay this forward. So
We're going to see this one again with somebody else presenting.
we are, and I'm excited to support them in that. I actually invested in this again. So
Peter, when I saw this slide and I saw the name, I thought that was a very appropriate name for that property, given how it looked. Kind of looks like a prison apartments.
well, so Nacogdoches is actually theoretically the first actual town in the state of Texas.
Oh, really?
And it was dubbed the Stone Fort. And so that's where this name, the Stone Fort Apartments, because they wanted to name themselves after the
That makes more sense, but it does seem pretty ugly in that picture.
it is very ugly, and you see a pretty drastic color change from this. So our property actually sat about a block behind the main road. So as you're driving down the main road, you have a strip center that's beige. Then you had an apartment complex that was beige, and you kept driving, and you just missed the whole thing. So there was nothing to draw your eyes to our property. There was no drive-by traffic whatsoever. So I needed to find a way to make people look as they're driving by. So this is what you see, is big red. Yeah. So we've got some before and after photos of what the interiors look like before I got a hold of them, and then what happened after we got a hold of them. So we came in and we put in new flooring, new paint, new light fixtures, appliances, just kind of really gave this place an overhaul. And
So to build on what we said earlier, he did things that drove the expense cost down. That flooring, almost every one of us uses that to great extent. When he bought it, it had carpet in it. When you have carpet, you've got to clean it, you've got to replace it, it wears out faster. This stuff has like 10-year warranties on it, where we don't have to worry about it. It's pretty mop and go when you do a unit turn on
Right.
these. The appliances, you don't have to worry about the refrigerators breaking, all those things. He put in the black appliances. I'm guessing they had white before, so also kind of brought it up probably in the appeal or the look.
we were able to charge about $250 more in rent.
And then there's that.
Yeah. So that was a minor motivation in doing what we did. But the interior renovations turned out well. Again, y'all saw the exterior that we painted. We redid the office as well. Let's see which.
That's the office.
The red wall was the old office, and the white is the after. And then again, signage. We renamed, rebranded, repositioned, and put new signage out there. So kind of a whole facelift all the way around.
All right, and that amounted to this.
So, numbers, yeah. So
this is actually the 3-year cycle that he took the place through. Year 1, year 2, and year 3, you see the income numbers there, the expense numbers, and everything else. And so as you did your $250 rent increases, you went from $588,000 all the way up to $715,000, right, basically in 3 years.
yeah, I mean, we jumped up really quick. And again, probably the most important thing to you guys would be the cash on cash returns, which year 1, I was able to provide about 12% distribution. I didn't, because I told them we were gonna distribute about 7 or 8%. Like I said, I forgot what I had promised, but we distributed what we said we were going to, and then we put the rest in our rainy day fund.
Mind if I jump in for a second?
Jump in.
Go ahead.
So remember how we talked about net operating income is a function of the value of the property? So what you want to see is that net operating income line growing. You see it growing? It's going up quite a bit in the middle one here. But one of the things that I love about Lifestyles and the way we teach is we really focus on raising the top line. As you can see, the income, Scott already talked about that, income shooting up. Slumlords focus on the expense side. Do you see the expenses going way down here? No, they're pretty flat. 298, actually, they even go up a little bit, 341, 344, because he's putting money into the property, he's doing things for the residents, those kinds of things. A slumlord will be, hey, we don't need to paint because it's good enough. We don't need to replace the carpeting because nobody will notice that stain. They'll put their couch there, right? That's the kind of stuff that slumlords do. And there's a lot of them out there. We'll talk about that at the 2-day. At Lifestyles, we focus on best product, best price, we call it, making it a great place for residents to live. And we can raise the rents because they want to live there, because we provide a really fantastic product in that neighborhood that they can't get elsewhere. That's why we focus in on the top line, not the expense line.
All
All
right.
right, and then how it all pays out.
Yeah, so again, fun, just kind of a wild story where we started out with talking about selling this property. You see in year 3 that the property value we have is 5.85. Well, that is what we valued at a 6 cap. That does let me account for paying some prepayment penalty, but still being able to give my investors the money that I wanted to at the end, which was basically doubling the money. We did obviously have to pay the bank back when we sold. We did obviously have to pay all of the investment, the original investors, back. We did distribute along the way, so that's what you see the cash-on-cash distribution as. And then at the bottom, you can see the total cash equity capture. Now, this, let's see. Yeah, the 1.66 does kind of account for that prepayment penalty that we talked about. So we ended up, again, selling this at 5.1, not the 5.85. But what we did is we sold it, the buyer assumed our loan, so we didn't have the prepayment penalties. So it all kind of washed out the same whether I sold it to somebody that got a new loan, I had to pay a prepayment penalty, or somebody bought the property, assumed my loan, and we didn't have to pay that prepayment penalty. So to me,
It gets a little in the weeds, so if your eyes are fluttering because it's just over your head, the important thing is his investors got 127% profit in 3 years.
Yeah, we returned $1.5 million on top of their
That's
original
phenomenal.
investment. So
The net was the net either way.
that's the big message here is we did all right.
Any questions there? Okay, all right. So what'd you do to make all that happen?
So we, again, wanted to rebrand this thing. When I bought it, it was known to be kind of a rougher property. One of our, the property actually backs up to Sorority Row, and one of our investors was in the sorority that was right behind us, and she was like, we came and partied at this place all the time. I want to be a partner in this. So she got to tell us even more stories about like years past when she was in college. But yeah, the property did kind of have a rough reputation. So we came in, we rebranded it to North Star. It's on North Street, so we wanted to incorporate that word north in there. We were able to increase rents very significantly because of our interior rehabs. We freshened up the outside. We cut back trees, bushes galore. It seems like every year there we're having to do more and more work as far as landscape, but we ended up putting in exterior LED lights. We tore down fences and put up new fencing around the place. It just made it overall look much, much fresher. The other thing we did as far as the expenses go, the water bill was super high there, and I was actually convinced that we had somebody coming in to steal water off of our property. I mean, it was to the point where I put up cameras. We put locks on all of the exterior faucets. I mean, it was a wild thing. And what we ended up doing there was I had our plumbing company that we use come in and camera our lines. And we went building by building. Well, I was also convinced that our meter wasn't right, so I had the city replace that. That didn't really help anything. But what we did is we told all our residents, don't use water from 11 to 2. Don't flush the toilet, don't take a shower, don't do anything. And so literally we went, oh,
Did that work?
yeah, it did. Well, no.
My residents don't listen all the
we
time.
had a success story, but that didn't work. But the other thing about this is a 14 building property. So there's 14 buildings for 79 units. So it's a big spread out property, and it was going to be an undertaking to do this. But what we did is we started from building 1, and we had the plumber camera underneath every building. And if we saw any water dripping whatsoever, we would go to that unit. We would go in. If they weren't home, we would check sinks, toilets, all that good stuff. But to your point, yes, some people were still taking showers. There were still dishwashers going. There were still things like that. So we had to stop them, make sure that the water stopped dripping, and then we would keep pulling back to kind of, look for the water leaks. We did find several, and I'll tell you that effort dropped my water bill from about $7,500 to basically about $5,000 a month. So it was, and when I bought it, it started out at $5,000. So that was the thing that kind of freaked me out when it got up to $6,000, then $7,000, then $7,500. And there were no water leaks anywhere. We couldn't find it. So
just to give you an idea, that $2,500 a month, that's $30,000 a year. And when he gets you into capitalization rates on Sunday, he's going to show you how that $30,000 was equal to $600,000 worth of gain in value on this thing. These little things that we learn, that we go in and do, have a tremendous effect on the values of these properties.
And I want to caveat something I said before. Remember I said we don't focus on the cost side, but this is actually a good place to focus on the cost side, because does the resident get upset because their old leaky toilet has been replaced by a new one that works? No, right? We're actually improving their life and reducing costs, but our focus is not on just cutting costs.
And it helps when you save them $20 on their water bill and you come back and you increase their rent by $50, they don't get quite as upset.
Yeah, that's true.
well, these people weren't
Some of them
paying
do.
their water yet. We still had all the water included in the rent at that point in time. So,
So
so they didn't really care.
that just increased your NOI.
Yeah,
Okay.
in a big way,
In I would say most situations, we actually bill things like water, trash, gas. We bill those things back to the residents in a proportional manner. In this case, this was an all bills paid minus electricity.
Yeah,
I guess.
Nacogdoches has kind of been late to the game in getting on board with the whole billing utilities
And
back.
it seems to be common in a student housing
Yeah.
situation. I've seen it in other
But
places.
we're all on board now, including this property and the one I'm running in Nacogdoches. So, yeah. So those are some of the things we did to make this more valuable.
All right. So how's all this changed your life?
Well, again, the best part of it is being able to retire from my audiology career at 44. I practiced 20 years, and that was great, and I'm happy to not be doing that anymore.
Another career we ruined.
Yep. And
Good command.
so again, multiple income streams. As said before, I've been an IRO, I'm a lead, I'm passive in deals. We've got to get Marco out of the ER, which as of October, he's quit working full-time and down to about 3-4 shifts a month, which is good. So stress level's great, work-life balance is great. Love to be on the boat scuba diving or under the boat scuba diving. Fitness, obviously I haven't done a lot lately, but I did lose some weight when I first sold my practice, which was good. Traveling, flexibility, and schedule. So.
All right. So where do we go from here?
So we still have a few complexes to buy. I'm not done yet. So I've got my sights probably set on about 2, 3, 4 more deals as a lead just for the time being. Long term, I've got to build that passive stream so that we can get under the water and start the RV life. So.
All right.
Yeah.
And who's on your team? You've got all the mentors listed there and the consultant.
Yeah, well, everybody, I guess maybe I tap into everybody too much. I don't know if that's what that means, but Lee Carroll was the one that really helped me on the nuts and bolts of this property, but both Scott and Curtis were instrumental in a point in time along the way and after closing as well. So Randa, I know she's somewhere in here. She was there she is. She was the consultant on this deal as well and was very helpful with our due diligence process and again, after closing.
And again, just like they talked about single family lifestyles realty, we also have a multifamily group, Diane, who brought this to you as part of that group.
Yep.
And we have them nationally as well.
Right. So the lender, at that point in time, it was Hunt Capital, Liberty Builders, Robert Wilkinson. He is the one that came out and did the work on the property for the exterior portion. I had a different contract crew doing our interiors, but Keith Sobel Insurance. And then I think that this goes unthanked a lot of times, but I also give great kudos to all my investors that were in this deal with me, because if it weren't for the investors, I mean, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Do we have any investors in here tonight?
We do.
Got a couple?
Don't be shy.
Come on.
Yeah.
There's one.
Oh, there's one, sort of.
So, yeah. And then just other members of Lifestyles. I mean, we're always on the phone with each other, just running ideas, problem solving, putting out fires. What do you do here? How do you solve this? So, I mean, it's just we're always on the phone together.
Yeah, that goes formally and informally. So once a month, we actually have a meeting in this room, and I would say we probably fill more than these two sections of the room with people who own their own deals or leads, and we are sharing ideas. We're talking about where are we going to get our insurance renewed, where we're going to get our 0.8 gallon flush toilets for the best price, all this sort of stuff. We kind of get down into the details and the weeds sometimes. And then there's a lot of more, I'll call them informal things, where up in Montgomery County in the Woodlands, they'll have a meet and greet where they'll all get together in a smaller group, and they'll get much deeper than we can in a bigger group. And those go on all over the place as well. In fact, we have ambassadors. I see one there. They organize get-togethers for passives, leads, everybody's involved in that as well. So lots of chances to network, interface, learn, share ideas.
And that's the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, it's support here. So
I want to go back to your investor, and I don't want to pick on your investors because I didn't tell him I was going to pick on him. So I'll have you answer for him.
Okay.
Your passive investors, do you make them come out every month and pick up garbage around the property?
I do not.
You make them like rehab some of the properties for you?
Do not.
What job do they have day to day at the property?
Nothing but leave me alone.
Okay, so who wants to leave him alone and make 127% profit? Anybody out there? Yeah, okay, that's good.
But we do. There are sometimes that there are passives that want to be a little bit more involved than others, and sometimes we have projects that we can involve them with, and that's fun too. I mean, I know it as an early passive myself. I was able to go out and visit a couple properties and learn some things operationally that way. So,
all right, questions?
Can you grab the mic?
Sorry. When you first, I might have been mistaken, but it looked like it said, was it adjustable rate mortgage when you first did the deal?
no, it was a fixed rate.
Was it fixed rate? Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay, then that's all I had.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Over here.
Yes, as an active investor, is there a skewed amount of profit that the active investor takes, and what's the maximum?
I don't know.
I think we're talking white paper rules, right?
Okay, yeah.
So
So all investors get the same payout regardless of how much they put in monetarily or if they come and visit the property or not. Is your question how much is the guy who is doing all the work? Okay, so there is a ramp there, and we actually limit how much a first-time lead can take to 5%. Prove yourself, and then you can move on from there, and you can go up to 20%. So
that's it.
And I will tell you that there are certain passive investors that will look for the kind of raw diamond to go out there and find that first or second timer so that they get that lesser cut. That's a strategy that some people as passives will use. Others say, no, I want the guy that's done it 10 times and he's never been wrong. He feels more safer.
And I gotta say, if you have ever looked at getting into real estate syndications outside of Lifestyles, some of the returns can be incredibly complicated. There's actually a book that if anybody wants to get geeky on this stuff like me, it's called The Hands-Off Real Estate Investor, and he has a paragraph where he talks about how the simple position of a comma in some of these complicated returns can have a massive difference in how the returns are paid out to the passive investors. We don't do it that way. We make it very simple, straightforward. If you come to my 2-day, I actually will show you some of the returns that outside syndicators, the setup they have for their payouts, and you'll see why I say they're complicated and confusing. I love the way Lifestyles does it because as a lead, I've invested with other people. You'll never see that in outside syndications. And some of them invest with me. You're invested in passive deals too, right?
Yeah, and this one that I sold, I've reinvested in because I believe in the lead in this property.
So that's kind of a cool thing where you have people investing with each other. You just don't see that outside lifestyles.
Others? Oh,
Yeah, I'd like to know, how do challenges and investment strategies change or vary, say, with commercial real estate?
well, I mean, I'm not sure if this is answering your question, so you can push me in one direction, but I generally classify these in two broad spectrums, and one of them is what I call a value play, where I want potholes in the parking lot, I want broken windows, and I'm gonna go in there and take that thing from, just junk, and we're gonna fix it up, we're gonna make it nice, we're gonna improve it.
Like
Now-
Peters.
Now,
Yeah.
you can't take it from a Class D, as we call it, to a Class A. You've got to be reasonable and say, I'm going to come in as a C and I'm going to take it to the next level up. Usually it's because of age or some other limitations in it. Now, the other category that I'll put it in is something that we call a yield play. And that's just a good deal. It's throwing off nice cash flow. Yes, I can find some hybrid stuff where I can tweak it. I may be able to go in there and do the water conservation. Maybe they left that out, and I'm looking for these little details that I can get into. So that's kind of the broad spectrum that I categorize them. I'm not sure if I'm hitting on what you're asking, though. Is that?
Well, I was referring to like strip malls.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we teach residential real estate, both single family and multifamily. We do not get into strip malls. We don't get into retail. We don't get into office. We don't get into student housing. We don't get into,
We're pretty specialized.
yeah, we're very narrow. Because the asset classes that we are in are very resilient. Do you want to own a lot of office space in downtown San Francisco right now? Bad idea, right? And who saw COVID coming? But there were certain real estate asset classes that struggled during COVID. Yeah, we're not in those.
Hotels and motels were in trouble during all that.
And a lot of short-term
in their house.
people that had short-term rentals in like New York City, a lot of them lost everything.
Yeah.
We don't do that stuff. I mean, some people do on their side, but lifestyle doesn't teach that.
I'm actually a retail investor. I have like $60 million worth of real estate. The problem is, as you know, when COVID came in, it put a real bad thing on retail.
Yeah.
So I'm getting out of retail and I want to go to more of a residential. And I know that people are moving from California to here. So I want to take advantage of that. And are you specifically looking at particular states that you're, like what states? Like Florida, maybe Texas?
So I was in Florida 2 weeks ago. We have, one member that I'm a part of that's in the Tampa and Sarasota area, and he's got 3 complexes out there now. So he is looking at those migrations. It's going mostly down the East Coast, wherever else into Florida. Florida has just been booming for the last 3 years or whatever. So we also have a pretty good sized group in Jacksonville and people leading up into Atlanta. I mean, we do have a national presence. So Texas is participating. Arizona did really well in the pandemic. Vegas.
And I know you have property in Ohio. I've got property in Indiana. We generally stay towards the middle of the country because we know what happens on the coast. Some weird stuff happens. But there have been, not recently, I don't think they would do it again. There have been a couple of properties in California that were successful. And all those people that used to invest in California now are doing it in Arizona. But generally, we stay in landlord-friendly states where we can execute our model effectively.
Yeah, what he was saying, I've got a portfolio around Cincinnati and Ohio and Kentucky, and
You've been scared of residential? Toilets, taxes, tennis? Well, yeah. I know.
It is the guy inside who pays the bills.
Yeah, we will.
I want to be chasing somebody for $1,500. If anything, I want to chase them for $20,000.
So the question was is chasing, he'd rather chase a tenant for $20,000 a month rent in a giant retail setting versus $1,000 for somebody who's a tenant. But we'll explain at the 2-day how we overcome many of those issues. Yeah.
we got anything online?
No, sir.
All right.
Quiet online.
One for Peter. How would you compare the personal time you spent managing your small IRO versus your lead deals?
All right, so it's a little bit complicated. No, so the IRO was my first property. So that's kind of what I learned how to run and how to operate a property. But since it was just me and I just had to watch the bank account, I didn't have to go very often. Now that I've got investors, even though I know what I'm doing more so now, I've got a obligation to make sure that I'm making a presence with my staff, with my residents, with my vendors that are in the community. So it was very learning intensive on my IRO because that was the first deal, but it is a little bit more time intensive now. Well, and I didn't need to report to myself. Now with running a syndication, I do put out monthly reports. I do put out communications to all the partners so that they know what's going on at the property in the community with me. And my IRO was only an hour away. This is about 2.5 hours away from my house. So it does take a little bit more time to manage that drive than previously. But, you know, I've purchased my 4th property now. And so I feel like I have a model, I have a system that works. And so that's kind of what you want to get to. And that way you're not reinventing the wheel every time you buy a property. You're just implementing your systems and your protocols.
So within Lifestyles, we have what we call the white paper, which is our own internal rules on how we do things. We have, you know, there's state laws and federal laws that we have to pay attention to, but we have our own internal rules. One of those internal rules, for example, is that every month we must provide financials to our investors within 30 days. We get them out. So if you have investors, that's something you're doing. Every 30 days you're getting them out. If you're an independent rental owner, that's all right. I'll get it next week, right? Doesn't matter because you're only reporting to yourself. But we require that you do these special steps when you have investors to make sure, you know, we want to try to, the whole goal behind the white paper is to make it, to protect the passive investors as much as possible. So that's why it's in place. And we'll talk again in great detail about that.
Which, I mean, it keeps us as the leads in check and make sure that we're doing what we need to. But I also appreciate it as a passive because I want to make sure that the deals that I'm invested in, my leads are doing what I expect of myself.
So once again, outside Lifestyles, you won't see syndicators investing in other syndications. It's only here that I've ever seen this. Any other questions for Peter?
All right.
He's doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Give him a hand.